Welcome everyone. My name is Andrew Neffy from Link Digital, and today I'm talking with Steven De Costa, the founder and executive director of Link Digital. Today we want to unpack some of the ideas around a new initiative that Link Digital is involved in, the Objective Observer Initiative. Steven, thanks for joining me. Look, what is the Objective Observer Initiative and what problem is it trying to solve?
For one, as a string of words, objective, there is some sort of like objective. So it's like a self-referential thing. I like that. I like self-referential things. Observer, I think the whole concept of what we have at the moment in terms of our technological abilities to be attenuated to things, it comes down to observation, record keeping, measurement, datification, and to what extent we have some sort of fine-grained control or some sort of governance control of those things. And initiative is largely around what's fundamental to us as humans. It's will, it's intent, right? So our initiative is essentially what is the kernel of truth, no matter what technology or context or situation we're in. So the Objective Observer Initiative, you might say, it's a bit of philosophy. It's a bit of like technocracy, some sort of idea that we can pull things together and use, leverage, and build things around the technology that we have that align to civics, social inclusion, like all the sorts of things that we've been building as liberal democracies over decades, hundreds of years. We've been building up. There's a whole history of this stuff, right? Social philosophy, actual lived experiences, generational understanding, sovereignty, nationality, culture, all this stuff, right? But we've got this technology at the moment, and it might usurp that, it might underwrite that, or it might undermine that, it might degrade that, it might do a complete memory write and just replace it. What is it? I don't know, but I know that we have an activity that we have to pursue as a collective. And technology is part of it because technology is the thing that would otherwise erode it. And we should and must fall back to things like philosophy, epistemology, what can be known, what is the knowing of things, or ontology, what are things? What is it when we say AI is going to change the world? Well, is AI a thing? Does it have a presence? Does it have a construct? Is it constructed on something? Does it have a manifold reality? These are all the things that I think are super important. Wrong answer?
No, there's no such thing as a wrong answer, Stephen. You know that.
Long, not wrong.
Oh, wrong answer. Well, there is such a thing as a wrong answer. That's for sure.
I'd be diminishing myself to say it was a wrong answer.
Okay, of course. But it's also about, my understanding, it's also about building free and open source software tools for verifiable, independent observation of digital public infrastructures. Can you talk about that aspect of it specifically? So
my view is I came into being a digital person or a data person or a coder type person from, I don't know, I can't quite remember how I actually got into it. I know how I got into it. I had a job. I built websites. The websites I built were related to clients that I were working with. And I had jobs with companies. And then I thought I'll start my own company. Independence, right? So unbridled. I worked with the government because I'm based in Canberra. I worked with other people because we wanted to work for the programs of the government here in Canberra. So that's the lineage of this impulse to say, what's next? How do you support civil society? I'm a Canberran. I'm a guy who grew up in a liberal democracy in a capital city with all the perks. And I have this deep-seated, crazy, perhaps, belief that matters, that this democracy matters, that this sort of thing that we're doing matters. So I don't quite subscribe to all of the other things that go on, like economics is fine, network power is fine, geopolitical power, it's all fine, it's all understandable. But when we start to think about technology and what we're building together, there's an actual practical application to that.
Can you give us some of those practical applications that you're hoping that will come out of the Objective Observer Initiative?
The funny thing is I went deep into this, right? So what is it that we are always wanting to do as a society? We want to have a relationship with the community, the space that we live in, the cohabitation, the co-beliefs, the co-understandings, all this co-constructive building together, understanding together, and cohabiting together. But what I think we need to do is build this stuff together, like move from public infrastructure, move from public understanding of what code is, what data is, what policy is, what community activation is, and rebuild that for the current society that we have.
So you've been working in the digital ecosystem, as you say, for over 2 decades, from the internet boom to building data portals with the Comprehensive Knowledge Archive network. What gaps or failures in the current open data ecosystem led you to the idea of the Objective Observer Initiative?
Well, so I came to the open data ecosystem basically by happenstance. Being situated in Canberra, I had proximity to government programs. When the open data declarations started getting written into policy, the winds of innovation, economic renewal, and all sorts of things, it largely came from programs of peer-to-peer networks like Airbnb and Uber. Like social contracting is like heaps cheaper than formal contracting. So there was a transition going on, and governments were thinking open data will facilitate that. Open and good governments can be the impresario. They can create a marketplace where open knowledge or open data will create free and open markets by which people can create new services, new economies. Right? I got involved in that, but ultimately it came from this idea of just understanding economics, just understanding also data, because way back in the day I did statistics and such at university, so I understood what data is and how to apply that in a social context. But where we go from there comes down to what our intent is and what we want to do together, or how we want to collaborate together. So there's no outcome without consensus. So data ended up becoming for me like civic consensus, civic will, civic purpose. And what I experienced when I first got involved with the open data movement was that consensus. It was that thing that I was missing as a commercial operator, someone who wants to build websites, make money, have staff, have a company. And I started to actually have a tactile experience of what it means to be involved in something that was like a consensus building. People had optimism around what the future could be. And it was built on this stuff like open data, open infrastructure, open communities, open source. I wanted to be a part of that.
That notion of open data as community, open data as consensus, a core part of why you got involved, also core to Link Digital's business plan, ethos as a company. But that's under a lot of pressure now. I mean, the notion of openness is under pressure, rising authoritarianism, increasing disinformation, a very fraught, that's an understatement, global situation where it seems that trust and social cohesion and the ability to form trust and social cohesion is going backwards and is getting harder and harder. How does the Objective Observer Initiative relate to that?
Well, so some of those statements, like the erosion of trust and the breakdown of all the things that I would have believed in or hoped for and worked towards as an open data advocate 12 months ago, I'm actually feeling like this negativity is actually quite brittle. Like, we've run a course. If you asked me the question 3 months ago, I would have been feeling like we really have to fight hard. But over the last 3 months, I've started to feel like we've got the way forward, which is just to slap folks around and point out that the authoritarian view is not going to actually churn the butter. It's not going to make the work get the outcomes that we need as 8 billion-ish people on a planet where we've got real challenges. So the cracks are already forming. And I think 12 months ago, this was my response. It was like, someone like Trump comes into power, challenges the whole idea of what an open movement might be, because we might slide into this crazy space. And we're kind of in that crazy space at the moment. But there is so much that looks like we're going to turn the corner at the moment, right? People are responding to it, systems are responding to it, and sense, I think, will become restored. But the lesson that will be learned, the rubric that will form from this is kind of like World War II. It's like, let's not backtrack into that again. And I think it's like a correction. It's like, let's use our data, let's use our understanding, let's comprehensively build shared understanding, international coalitions, markets, all sorts of things, international institutions, but let's make them resilient. Let's make them self-correcting. Let's make them transparent and open by default, but not subject to attack by malicious actors. So the concept there is that we need to have like statements of intent and will. We need to build that into why would folks want to interact with our systems. Like when I say our systems, like we own them, but systems by which we make ourselves open will require statements of kind of reciprocity, so that those who have statements of intent can interact with that declaration of reciprocity that they intend to provide to those systems. And I think this is going to be the next sort of challenge or the next step up for the way we interoperate.
And how does the Effective Observer initiative relate to this? Quite specifically.
Fundamentally, it's just trying to make it much more observable. Like public interest data, a big like outcome of the open data movement from 2010, 2016, or 2005 to 2005, 2015, I would say, was, hey, we've got all this data. Data is pretty important. It's something we can reuse. It's interoperable. Let's make it open so it creates more value for more people. And that was kind of like the first iteration. We then have international media platforms by which information dynamics can like manipulate the data that's out there. They could use that data for good or ill, or we could obscure and create value by not publishing data, but by open washing and saying we're going to be open, but not actually be open. There's different economies that have emerged over the last, certainly the last 10 years, that haven't really been transparent, haven't really been open. And I think the benefits of those economies are still there. I think we're just going to have to revisit them with our eyes wide open and say, if we don't do it properly, if we don't do it not just with openness and transparency, but with statements of intent assessed, that someone says, a jurisdiction, a government agency, a community says they're going to be open in a particular way, and they're going to bring the receipts, statements.
Which is what the Objective Observer Initiative is trying to do.
That's what you keep scratching at. So yeah, like
yeah.
I think so, right?
You picked that up. That was good.
Yeah, I know. Like it's a really complex computational agent that just has access to the world through perceptual networks, communication networks. You're like a bot that is running on someone's Mac Mini in their home, right? There's a consequence to your actions. There's a causality that has an effect, and that effect will have a consequence. If that consequence is that you make a bunch of money and it goes into your bank account, you might think that's pretty rich. That's pretty cool, right? If the consequence is that it might send out 20,000 emails to make $200 in your bank account, but the net effect is that 20,000 people have to delete that email, there's a negative to that complete state. So the idea of having an openness to society and openness to the technological processes by which we communicate and interoperate and have an agreement is really important. It's really important in the age of AI and automation and all this kind of stuff. And I think we're learning that in a very harsh way. It's a very challenging sort of harsh lesson that we're getting at the moment. It's not just bad state actors that are waging information war. There's just tech jockeys who are building stuff with technology that is trying to get your attention, scrape from you some sort of intentional act that might turn them into a click, turn them into a customer, turn them into whatever. This is what we have to grapple with. So how do we observe it? We don't have time. You don't have time. I'm not going to spend time to observe the intentions of all these digital actors in the world. We need a platform by which that observation does occur. And for me, that just means it comes down to philosophy. It comes down to what can be known about a thing? What is the epistemic reality of someone's intentions? What is the ontological truth? What is it that they're actually doing? And how do we track the doing to what we believe or know about their actions? And without that, we're not going to have society anymore. We're not going to have civil structure. We're not going to have marketplaces. We're not going to have trade. We're not going to have so many things because we're not divorcing, we're offloading the metabolic load of thinking about things to the cognitive capability of artificial intelligences and automated systems. And if we don't do that with ethics or moral or intent, literally pre-stated intent, that we won't have an interoperable society. So that's what the OOI is about, not in short number of words. Sorry about that.
So digital sovereignty is a term that gets used a lot. In the context of the Objective Observer Initiative, what does it actually mean for an organisation managing a data pool?
The cool thing is, as much as like Link Digital is a company, that's our bread and butter. We care about organizations and publishing their data sets and publishing it for a reason, having impact. From my point of view, digital sovereignty starts at the person level. So I do want to do things and I do want to have a digital self. How do I control that? How do I have sovereignty? How do I have dominion over the things that I might want to do or the things I might want to be influenced by from digital communications? That is a citizen thing, and that wraps up naturally into a jurisdiction thing, a community thing. So where we have data portals, and data portals are going to represent potentially the sovereignty of a particular group of people, or a particular organization, or a particular domain of expertise, or a domain of intent to communicate about things, flood data, or environmental data, or data that climbs on rocks. All the kinds of data. It has signal. And it's coming from some authoritative source of truth, we would hope. The point is, what is that truth? Is it me as a person, a sovereign individual? Is it a government department which should have some sort of sovereign integrity because it's got a mission statement and it's doing things? Or is it a jurisdiction? And that's the evolution of the data portal. It must be impactful and it must have causal impact.
So what does the Objective Observer Initiative look like in practice? What do you think it'll look like in practice? I mean, we're building some tools and systems at the moment to link into this. Can you talk about some of these? Can you talk about some of the applications of them?
Yeah, but it's been a long journey to get to the point of understanding what we might want to capture, because data is captured all the time. Right? But other categories of data or categories of events you want to capture that solve for the human condition or the societal condition. And I kind of think there are, and I kind of think there's three categories. So one category is based on time, events, actions. So the concept of a time from something happened then to something that will happen next or something might happen in the future is an actionable event-based concept, let's say. And how do we reconstruct time, I think, is a key thing that we have to understand as a society or as a bunch of folks that might work with technologies. And this observability of time is a shared construct. So if we want to have consensus, I'm a Gen Xer, right? If you wanted to go and you wanted to have some New Year's catch up with a bunch of friends who would say, I'm going to meet you at the clock in the center of the city at midnight, or 15 minutes to, and I'll be east, west, north, or south of the clock by about 50 meters. So this concept of time and space was very much understood before we had an immediacy of connection and communication. We had to actually construct preemptively the notion of space, and we would build it into the way that we actually thought about the world and thought about reality. I'm not saying we lose any of that today, but we risk so much if we just divorce ourselves of those cognitive skills. So time is a really key part of the experiment of the Objective Observer Initiative. I suspect, and I really do believe, that The more we control time, the more we have a record of time. The more we can build things that are associated with consensus around time, the more it becomes real for us, right? There's consequence. You don't do things by Tuesday, or you don't do things by the time by which people agree that we should do things. There should be social consequence. There should be like practical consequence. And if we don't have those things, then we're going to lose touch with our reality. And the second one is just space, like geography, but also relationship space. So do I have a relationship with the city anymore? The place I used to go when it was New Year's Eve and I would meet people at a clock? Well, not really, because I would meet them for a G meet, right? But it doesn't mean I don't have a special relationship with it. So what is the new paradigm for special relationships? What is a relationship that spans these things? We need to capture that. We need to actually have an understanding of that. We need to have data sets that give us a meaningful way by which we can navigate these things across space, across time, and ultimately across meaning, which is the third type of experiment. So what does it want to do? If you want to go to the clock on New Year's Eve, what's your intent? Why are you willfully acting on New Year's Eve to go to the clock, to have a celebration, to meet with friends, to wind up the last year or greet the new year? What is your intent? That meaningfulness, that selection, that selectability of collective agreement is the next sort of type of experiment. And I think those are the things, those three things fundamentally break down everything that we want to do with technology, what we want to do with agreement.
So rather than talking about the tools that we're seeking to build as part of this initiative, it's better to talk about experiments that we're seeking to conduct in relation to it. Is that a more accurate way of thinking about it?
So I think so, but that's my hypothesis, right? So there's two aspects to this that I want to take from either the scientific method or the constructive method. So if you're going to be a chef in a kitchen, you've got all these tools, you've got all these ingredients, but your method is a creative method. And your outcome is, first of all, captured within your mind. I'm going to create a meal for 5 people. It's going to be this kind of meal, right? I think in the Objective Observer Initiative, I'm kind of taking all that stuff a little bit literally. It's like, how do we recreate the art of creating a meal? How do we create the art of experience for those who would have a meal? How do we create a platform by which people could come together and create meals for people who would have experiences of meals? Experiences, perceptual, sensorial, in the living world, right? That's an art-first approach. That's a creative approach. That's like film. It's like radio. It's like TV. It's like script. It's like playwrights, right? We have to manufacture and co-construct that. We might do it individually. We might do it through our collective agreement. We might do it in all sorts of forum or all sorts of theatre. But that, for me, is like one aspect of the Objective Observer Initiative. The second is basically experimentation. Like, there is a method to this, and we can improve the methodology of this, but we should have hypotheses. We should say, this is what I'm intending to do. I'm intending to create a meal of a certain type for a certain type of audience in a certain type of way that have a certain type of expectation and a certain type of outcome for their experience. But if it doesn't outcome in that way, like if my intent is not right, then we should be adaptive to that. There should be a methodological adaptation to say, these 8 people or 8 organizations or 8 communities of intent came together to have a particular outcome, but it didn't work. It didn't create the outcomes of the intent. That's a scientific methodology. And I think that requires experimentation, not just from the point of view of what we're trying to do collectively, but the platforms by which we try and construct that collectivism.
Okay. Then let's look at this and let's ask this question another way then. I'm a data manager. I run an open data. I run an open data portal. Why would I want to get in? I mean, I want my data to have impact. I want my data to build trust, is a clumsy way of saying it, build trust or help with social cohesion or inform people about a certain topic or something like that. All the things that we've seen data portals as wanting to do. Why would I want to get involved in this initiative? What would it mean for me? What could I experience? What would be the benefit?
So that's the point. I would turn that around. So what's your intent?
Okay.
If you don't have a stated intent,
Right.
then we can't experiment. If without a statement of intent, all we have is a product. We have you as a persona. What we have is we situate you in a world by which the current paradigm of data commercialization, data silos, a stochastic understanding of individuals that you want to like not subvert, but like service in a customer service sort of way. Like all these things start to remain as the current paradigm. What I'm suggesting is, why won't you just state what your intent is? And then why won't you collaborate and co-construct with others to meet your intent? Why can't we mentally get to the outcomes that we need to do, that we need to achieve collectively? That's what the objective observer is. Because we live in a very highly competitive world. We state these claims by which I'm going to start a business, I'm going to run a government, I'm going to have a policy, I'm going to be all these sorts of things. And then we have to stay under those stated claims as if we're stuck to prove them out. It's kind of okay, but if we have an externalized observer, we can make those claims and then we can collectively act towards like achieving those claims. But is there not a third party that might be able to observe? Should we integrate our claim and the objectives of our claims under the agreements that we form, by which we can get a third party to say, hey, by the way, you 13 folk that all had a stated claim that you wanted to work together upon, it's not quite working out. Or it could work out, but it could work out better. That's the kind of concept of the objective observer initiative.
Okay. CKAN is a big part of our business. I mean, we're a co-steward of the Comprehensive Knowledge Archive Network. How does this relate to CKAN? Does it relate to CKAN?
Well, kind of. Like everyone's got their golden hammer, and we have our history. So my causal history, this company's causal history, the reason why you've got a job and everyone in this company's got a job is because at some point in the past, we jumped on board with CKAN. It's like an open data project.
Yep.
Associated with open knowledge. To me, it just made sense to work with an open source orientated like technical project. It's been around since 2006. It's in its 20th year. And if you're going to change the world, you've got to change it through community. It's got a pre-existing community. I don't necessarily think that it, by the virtue of itself being in existence, is going to be the technical solution. But what will be the solution is a community of actors and a community of interests and a community of adoption. So why not start with something that already has almost like the genome of the right kind of change and mutation and adoption that we would require. Right? So that's why I think CKAN matters, and that's why I very personally and very selfishly think CKAN should be at the center of this thing. It's open source, it's sovereign tech, right? You can deploy it in any cloud, any on-premise, any environment, under your own jurisdictional control, in your own home, if it's going to be a data architect of how you move forward, right? So why not?
Talk to me about Link Lab. It's a new concept for Link Digital, a place where people can contribute to the Objective Observer initiative. Can you talk a bit more about what Link Lab is and what kind of contributions you're looking for, or you're open to?
So Link Lab actually came out of just 2013, I think. GovHack, the company right back then, was like pivoting from being a company that did websites, digital services. It was a digital agency, and we're moving into this open data, open space, right? So the very first GovHack that we were involved in, I created a thing called Link Lab, just to say that we're open for innovation. Policy innovation, technical innovation, the way in which government in Canberra might work with a company like us. And Link Lab today, in my mind, is just like rehashing the same thing. It's the same sort of identity. It's like, we're not an R&D company. We would love to be, but to structure a commercial company to be an R&D company requires scientists. It requires the right kind of process procedure and auditable controls to do proper science methodological, right? But it's very often used that a lab within a commercial entity is more like innovation. So for me, Link Lab is, how do we cut through and say, we're trying to do something new, we're really trying to innovate. We're trying to work with the domain expertise that we already have and the clients we already have. And we would love to onboard customers or other parties, true research institutions, for example, to work with us and actually co-construct this kind of stuff.
It's basically a space where Link Digital and other groups can work together on co-constructing this initiative. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Objective Observer Initiative is meant to be totally external to Link, well, not totally external. Obviously, we're supporting it, right? So we're trying to endorse it, we're trying to kickstart it. But ultimately, it's not about us. But if we're going to align with it, what's our innovation footprint as a company? So Link Lab is the idea of bridging what OOI claims to be and hopes to be, and will try and build itself to be as an independent innovation hub, and how Link Digital as a commercial entity would bridge to that.
So, that's an important point too. We don't own the initiative. In the strict sense of the word, it's the initiative. The OOI is an open invitation, and we're seeking partners and technical contributors to build, and whoever else is interested, to build this together. Yeah.
Kind of quite literally. So Open Data AI and OpenData.ly, the domain names, they're actually assets that are owned by me.
Registered in connection to the OOI. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I registered in 2015, right? Yeah. So 2015, I was at a conference in Vegas, and I thought, I really want to do something with open data that would be orientated towards a humanistic approach to open data. There should be a community to this. And back then, there were domain names that would go to the LY and make it a doing word, right? So Open Data Lee is a humanistic way to do open data. Open Data AI becomes this mechanistic or machine-based way of doing it. It's like the Terminator. There should be some sort of platform play. In my mind at the time, I was thinking this is
Skynet, not Skynet.
Not Skynet. I wasn't actually thinking of intelligence. I was just thinking of platform.
The antithesis of Skynet.
And although I talked to folks at Data 61 about it, because they had AI engineers back then, and had these ideas, recommendations engine. You have a jurisdiction in one place in the world that has the same sort of demographic as another place in the world. Why wouldn't you want to use a recommendation engine to suggest how they run policy, how they create data sets, how they support their government agencies and their government programs? But anyway, the point is, back then, that's when I registered it. But these days, it's more still have that same idea that there's a humanistic way of doing this. How do we get all the social capital of what open data is about and openness is about, and the technical exhaust system of all our technology, which is data, into a place where the social dynamics are clear. The statements of intent of different parties and different actors, different incentives is clear. For me, that all happens on open data link. So people can want to build, if they want to build an open commercial entity, they can do it. If they want to build experiments that have commercial aspects to them, they can do it. They have their statements of intent. They put it on open data link. There's a reality to the commercial markets and the incentives they create. They move the world, right? They move oil around the planet. They move all sorts of things around the planet through commercial incentives. So why wouldn't we want to have a place that fully captures, understands, and supports that? But ultimately, you want to have an abstract record or an account. And that's what Open Data AI is always going to be about. Well, always, as in from 20th of January, 2023.
Okay, we'll go back a little bit. These ideas have been bubbling around in your head for quite some time. What was it that catalyzed your decision to really take this risk and move ahead, really, with this idea of the Objective Observer Initiative, with the idea of actually putting time, energy, and resources into it?
There's definitely a catalyst moment, but I guess the bits and bobs that came into that wouldn't make sense without explaining that. So I got involved in open data in 2012 simply because I had a digital agency operating with government since 2001. Anyone who works with government, and particularly around digital works, it's like things just don't last. Like a government changes or a department changes, programs change, incentives change, and the thing that you spent a lot of time building with, really well-meaning and like concerning stakeholders might just ephemerally disappear after 3, 4, 8 years, whatever it might be. So starting a company in 2001 to 2012, it's not like I was jaded or despondent or anything like that, but when the open data movement came to my footsteps, I guess, or just right in front of me, I thought, I love this because it has long-term viability. It was connected to this idea of like social contracts, Airbnb, Uber, that kind of stuff. Like you can have innovation that's based simply by having better information dynamics so that party A and party B can contract through understanding alone, not formal legal. And that worked for me. But coming to kind of like 2016, 17, 18, 17, I moved to, like, I did a famil to Berlin. I wanted to move the company or like grow the company, first of all in UK, but then we had Brexit. Then my second choice was the US, and Trump got elected in 2016. And then the third choice was basically, in terms of democratic House of Orders, it was Germany, because there's a powerhouse in Europe, and it was pretty conservative and understanding of how we do government, deeply bureaucratic. So I ended up moving there 2018. I was there for 2 years, but at the same time, I'm trying to work out how do we seed or ground this idea of reality with this technocracy that I thought open data would deliver. And it was definitely late 2018 that I kind of had this revelation, or not quite revelation, but this epiphany, and thought, well, it's all system dynamics. It's all information as system dynamics. And there's a stratification for it, and there's different energy levels, and you can't get to different strata levels unless you've got the right abilities to move between strata. I know that sounds kind of wacky and spiritual. It's really not. I went on the internet to search because I thought, this is not new thinking. Someone else must have come up with this before. And I found the work of David Deutsch and with regard to constructor theory. And that, for me, was the catalyst. It took another 7 years to really ground and start churning out the actual catalytic event. But for me, understanding things not as a manifold, that we have starting conditions, a box of stuff, and ending conditions, but we have a strata by which things can be possible or impossible. Constructor theory really did it for me. The catalyst event, to cut this very, very long, probably boring and unattainable story for others, is the Trump presidency. Trump got elected, but then he started his presidency, and one of the first things he did was like being strong on Putin. That to me felt like manipulation. Like it was an emotional thing. I felt good that someone like Trump was going to be strong on Putin, but at the same time, having such a close awareness of the conflict in Ukraine since 2014 and especially since 2022, I knew I was being manipulated. I felt good about what he said, and immediately I felt ill to my stomach. I don't know, I spent 2 or 3 days almost not quite in bed, but non-disposed to normal thinking. And at the end of it, I just thought, I can't do this. I can't reconcile this kind of future with the complete past that I've had for the last decade. And my response to that was to be constructive. What can I build? What can I do? What's the philosophy? What's the actual thing that would solve this kind of problem? And to me, that became the Objective Observer Initiative. It became this pro-constructive optimism that allows you to try and build systems that are open by default, declarative by default, so that should bad things happen in the future, those who make declarations upon transparent actions, there's a reformation. There's a comeuppance against them because you said you were going to do this, but you didn't actually do it. 12 months later, you didn't do it. So how do we build for that kind of, it's a wave of popularism and not quite conservative, but popularism that allows people to get to positions of power based on prior statements, help people to feel good about the world, help people to feel that their particular locality and their local concerns resonate with this particular personality. But then after the fact, that's it. They don't care because they're just voting. after the fact. The policies, the procedures, the dogmatism, all this kind of stuff, right? It's just the dogma it's the antithesis of what they might have been voted in to enact. How do we reconcile that?
And they never actually intended to do those things.
Of course, there's no honesty there.
Yeah.
So the verifiability becomes irrelevant because the system doesn't reward verifiability. It rewards popularism and, clicks, likes. But anyway, that was the catalyst. It's not to say that that's been driving me ever since, because I've got 20 years of being a complete nerd that has actually driven me through my entire life.
Sure.
It's just that that particular moment said to me, there's no holding back anymore. There's no future unless you create that future for yourself, right?
Yeah. I mean, there was just observing it from the outside. There was a point at which you seemed to make that decision. I could see that it geared up. It got a bigger initiative. It became a more important thing. It was something that you were doing. It was something that you were committing resources, time, energy to, much more.
Yep. But more,
and now it's something that Link Digital is involved in, and
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's prescient, but I'm glad that I got so gut-wrenchingly involved in it, because I think it remains relevant.
Yeah.
A company like Link Digital, which thrives on openness and open data and open institutions, right? We have no budget. We have no share of wallet. We have no political backing. Unless people believe in those things, and they might be bureaucrats, they might be politicians, they might be citizens. But unless we can be in a world where those things actually matter, we have no business in this world. We build open data portals. So it's an existential threat for everyone at Link Digital when someone like Trump comes into power and starts just casting complete crap into the world and saying that's gold. Look at all my glitter.
I love gold.
Yeah.
Can't be answered easily. If we fast forward 5 years and there's some progress with this, what would it look like? What's been achieved or changed?
There's so much that I would hope for the OOI to be able to achieve. But fundamentally for the company, if I try to ground it, I can actually just make it a piece of infrastructure.
Please ground it.
There's this guy, you might have heard of him, Tesla, right? He came up with some crazy cool stuff in his mind that turned into things like AC and, all sorts of stuff.
Played by David Bowie at some point, yes.
But, eventually these ideas become so grounded that they become part of modern society, electricity networks and all sorts of things, right?
Yeah.
I'm not at all thinking that this stuff that I'm talking about is a singular-minded moment, right? But I think there's a convergence. And for the OOI, I think this convergence will naturally happen. I think our awareness as a group of people who have this concept of civilization that we've been building for 2,500 years will reconnect with the concept of familiarization. What are we familiar with? What does a family want? What does the people on the street want? Familiarization comes before civilization. And our technology is bringing all of the stuff that we think is civilization much closer to home, as if it really matters. So the OOI would be successful if we can distance ourselves from the familiar civilization. Every part of civilization at the moment is screaming to become familiar. It wants the next car to be your car. It wants the next ice cream flavor to be your flavor of choice, right? This is not a familiarization that we all need immediately, all at once, all the time, right? So what I hope for the OOI to become is just part of the narrative. It might accelerate some things in some ways. It might facilitate some things in some ways. But ultimately, I want it to be part of a narrative that we all move towards, which is, not everything in civilization needs to be so familiar that you get angry about it, that you think that person is like a bad mother to you because it ruins your life. These things are not real. Civilization is roads, it's infrastructure, it's all sorts of things, but it's not.
And you're feeling positive at the moment. More positive.
Yeah, hell yeah. I feel that way simply because that's the way the math would say. There's a nihilism, a surrealism, and an existentialism that is mixed up in the way that I think There's a nihilism that none of this stuff matters. So whatever you pick to make matter is fine. There's a surrealism to say, no matter what you pick, something completely bizarre might still ascend. So just let it go, right? But then there's an existentialism, which is just like this fundamental reality that I can't let it lie that all these things might happen. And they could be so ridiculous, so evil, and so bad, because that's not who I am. So my existential reality is going to define the way I act in the world. And I want it to be one of ethics. I want it to be one of aesthetics. I want it to be one of beauty and compassion, coherence, right? So I don't honestly care too much about how the world comes out, because I have that streak of surrealism and nihilism. I understand that that's the way reality can play out. But for my part, I want to act in a different way.
If someone is watching this and wants to learn more, wants to get involved, how should they start?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess just go to opendata.ly. I'm pretty sure that will be updated in the near term to have kind of engagement points. At the moment, it's just got Link Digital's statements of intent and my own. But the idea is that if people wanted to get involved, they firstly start by saying what their intention is. And that the funnel, the vehicle, the touch point for that is going to be opendata.ly. Let's just be open. Like, consider yourself a vehicle by which you create events in the world. You're part of the time. You're part of the zeitgeist. But if you want to be less geist, you want to be more corporeal, you want to be part of the world, you want to act in the world and actually have an impact, maybe you want to go to opendata.ly.
Okay.
You just heard the conversation about the Objective Observer Initiative, its catalyst, how it plays a role in open source and open data that we have today. Visit opendata.ly to learn more.